We talked about having CSV text as game data, but you don't want this. This is pure garbage. You need a CSV interface. In this video, we are seeing how to export all your spreadsheets to CSV files with a single mouse click, without losing the formatting of your data interface, from a macro, from Calc. So you can easily build game data for any project in Godot. CSV will be the format of the data, but we should not be adding like this. Instead, you need to have a nice formatted file for a cleaner interface, much better. You also are going to need Godot to not detect the folder, but still be inside the Godot project folder. Those are going to be your data source files, and how all that together will allow you to make structured game data, which will be used for the RTS project. Last part we saw the planning phase, this one we are starting to working on it. So let's talk about how we are going to manage a CSV file as database for a game. First question is, what software are we going to use? I'm going to be using Libreoffice Calc, which is the spreadsheet editor for Libreoffice, the document foundation. It does not matter which software you use, just keep in mind the limitations of the CSV file format. It is pure exposed data as text, so any formatting you give is probably going to get lost when you save it. Here's an example of a CSV database I'm using for another project. We can see we have colors and custom formatting going on. This works for the default format of LibreOffice, which is ODS. When we export this to CSV, this is what it's going to look like. And as you can see, it's a lot more complicated to work with this way. And this happens because CSV only keeps the text information, nothing else. So how can you keep the formatting of ODS like this while still being able to save a CSV file? I'm using a macro for that. This macro exports all the sheets from an ODS file as separate CSV files, delimited by semicolon as separator, exported at the same file path where the ODS file was saved. If you want to have it like me and you want to have a ODS file which you can manage your data very easily, then you're going to export the data as a CSV file through a macro. Here's what you're going to do. First, let's see how to create the macro. On LibreOffice Calc, go to Tools, Macros, and Edit Macros. Then find here the macro standard folder and the custom macros stored by default on the module 1, which can hold many macros at one time. Now if you open that file, you can paste here the macro itself. You can find this macro on the description below. It's a link to a pastebin folder, so you can grab the macro online from text. I didn't make this macro, but I cannot remember where I got it from. So copy and paste the macro here. It should start with the keyword sub. The next word here is the name of the macro, which is going to be stored. So after you paste the macro code, save your macros here. This macro saves all the sheets under the ODS file as separate CSV files. The name of the CSV exported file is the name you gave it to the sheet, down here on the left bottom corner. Now on LibreOffice, we need to add a shortcut button to run this macro in the toolbar, so you can run the macro at a single mouse click, which is pretty handy. To add a custom toolbar item to the LibreOffice Calc toolbar, go to Tools and Customize. Now, find all the commands assigned here where you want the macro to be. On the category, select Macros. Now you're going to expand My Macros and find the macro which you just saved previously. Then finally, for you to add the macro as a toolbar item, just click on Add Item. Now we have a custom toolbar shortcut to execute our macro. So next, we want to be able to have a folder inside Godot, which Godot does not know it exists, but we still want to be able to place files and archives that we're going to be accessing later. This is going to be inside the folder of the project, and we want a new folder called Data, which we are going to place any exported data from the project tools. So then we can manage our data in the project tools folder and export the data files, which are going to be CSV files on the data folder. So for Godot to ignore a folder, you just have to create a file with the extension .gdignore, and Godot will not attempt to export or import that file whatsoever. So now that this file is here, if we go back to our Godot project, you should not be able to see that folder here. And this is good for us because it allows us to keep here the data source files, the ODS formats, and when we want to export the data to our game, we're just going to place the data here on another folder. So this is quite good if you want to bundle some tools with your project but do not want your project to mess them up. So now if we saved our empty LibreOffice Calc sheet here to that folder we just created, and we open that up here, on the project tools, we should be able to see our gamedata.ods, which is the empty sheet I just wrote. Now, on the Godot project, we should not be able to see any import attempts by the engine, which is exactly what we want. Every time we want to update our game data, we're going to generate the CSV files and we're going to copy to another folder in our project. So back to our Godot project, let's add a new folder here and let's call it data. So any data we want is going to be inside this folder, and we have a hidden folder here which is the project tools, which you can manage anything we don't want Godot to touch, but we still want to be accessible and be bundled inside the Godot project. So let's make a test sample here just to see if our macro is working properly. I'm going to give the first cell test A and the second cell test B, and the font is way big. So on test A I'm going to give 10, test B I'm going to give 20. Test A on cell 4 I'm going to put a single quote here, 1.0. So by placing that single quote, LibreOffice Calc will not try to automatically interpret this and is going to keep the text just as you wrote it. So we can also make here a test and call this true. We're going to call another one and let's put here 0.01 and another one we're going to give it a false value. Now let's save this and let's use our macro now, save and export CSV. Now back in our file manager, we can go right ahead to project tools, and here we're going to see a sheet1.csv, which is the sheet we just generated with the CSV extension. So let me open Notepad here and let's drag and drop the CSV here. So as you can see, the macro exported correctly. We have here test A, test B, 10, 20, and you can see that the limiter is the semicolon, and it exported everything as a single text. So the macro is working as it should, and now we have something to test. Now I'm going to delete this sheet, and I'm going to go back here to our spreadsheet file, and I'm going to rename the spreadsheet to something else like game data. Let's keep it generic. So now when we export this, so if you go back here, we can see gamedata.csv. So this is working as it should now. So now we can come in here and change the color to something we want. And we can add some formatting here, like bold. We can center it. I'm going to delete this row. So in theory now, you can have all your information right there, save it. When you hit the macro and we go back here to a file manager, I grab the notepad and drop the CSV. We have our custom formatting interface and we have the data export as CSV the way we want it. So let's just recap what we just did. We learned how to structure data using CSV files. We created a data folder for our Godot project to keep data files. We created a folder called project tools, which we want Godot to ignore that file while we still want to keep ODS files to manage our database. From ODS formatted files, we are going to export CSV files using the macro which I gave in the video to the data folder of Godot so we can handle the data structure for our game. And that should allow us to create database for our games. So on the next part, we are going to keep working on this and going to create a CSV database using Godot. I'll see you on the next part.